I will mostly tell you about the international developments of today and only touching a little bit on our national things, so to say. There are really lots of balls in the air in the regulatory playing field as it concerns automated vehicles nowadays. Traditionally, we have had vehicle technical regulations and we have had traffic rules. In both of these, the United Nations Economic Council for Europe is a key player. For technical regulations, there is Working Party 29, and for traffic rules, Working Party 1. These two sets of regulations have come from various pipelines, so to say. And nowadays, it's very much the issue that we are dealing with the same things, though from different perspectives. And we would need really to talk a lot with each other in order to not have any regulations that are contradictory, but more like complementary. Then also nowadays we have regulations for artificial intelligence. In the EU we have a regulation that is now soon to be voted upon by the European Parliament, and then the trilogies between the Council and Parliament will begin. Also, the Council of Europe is developing international instruments for regulating artificial intelligence as a whole, but also an instrument concerning the liability regarding automated vehicles. And then again, we also have data protection rules. Data is a big issue for automated traffic as well. And there we have obviously GDPR for the EU countries and also some directives that concern liability issues coming from the EU. And the whole picture should somehow be kind of in the hands of the active players in the field. I really don't envy those players myself. Today I'm going to concentrate on the traffic rules issue, the WP1 side. The official name of this working party is Global Forum for Road Traffic Safety, and as the name indicates, it focuses on improving road safety. So all the instruments that are being prepared by the WP1 have as they focus road safety. The primary function of WP1 is to serve as a guardian for international legal instruments on which the national rules on traffic are based on. In Finland, we have Tieliikennelaki, that is the Act on Road Traffic, that is based on the 1968 Vienna Convention. When it comes to transport automation, WP1 has produced one rather important change into the Vienna Convention. That is the so-called Article 34 bis that entered into force almost a year ago. And it says that those provisions in the Vienna Convention that requires that every vehicle must have a driver can be satisfied by an automated driving system if that fulfills domestic and international technical regulations and domestic traffic rules. So that means that as itself, Article 34 bis does not change anything until the countries implement that in their national legislation. And that is what is going on in many of the countries. We only have a very limited number of countries that already have some sort of rules on deployment. There are more countries that are planning or are rather far in their planning of such rules. And also we in Finland, we are planning, so to say. Then we have two quite important resolutions. These are non-binding legal instruments, but in any case, especially this 2018 resolution on deployment of highly and fully automated vehicles have created lots of important principles that are still alive today. And now what happened or is going on is that a group of experts on drafting a new legal instrument was established in 2021. And the aim is to produce a draft, as it says, for a new legal instrument. The mandate was extended until the end of 2024. And now the first actual draft for such a legal instrument in the format of a convention is produced, and it can be found from the UNECE web pages. It is an interesting document, I'm sure, but when reading it, you have to keep in mind that it's really the very first draft, so it's going to change many times. And the aim at this phase is actually to provide a basis for further discussions. It's easier to discuss about things when you have some concrete at hand, so that you can see what the others are thinking actually, and you can say that I disagree or I don't or agree. And you also have to keep in mind that it is not an official opinion of any of the countries that have acted as a submitters to this paper. Finland being listed as the first one because we are the first in the alphabet. So it's an expert level work that is based on expert discussions amongst the experts. The scope of the new legal instrument that is defined in the mandate of GE3 is that it should complement the existing Vienna and Geneva conventions. So it doesn't supersede in any way, but it's supposed to complement those existing very important conventions. There is a need to set legal provisions for safe deployment of automated vehicles, and in particular, interaction between automated vehicles and the other road users, especially vulnerable road users. That is one of the focuses of WP1. And then again, what needs to be addressed is the changing roles and responsibilities of natural, and here comes something that is rather new, also legal persons in relation to automated vehicles. One of the major challenges or threats, risks, if how you would define it, when the GE3 started its working, there was a study conducted amongst the members, and one of the major risks identified was this unclarity of these roles as it comes to automated vehicles. Basically, this new legal instrument should only address automated driving systems when the ADSs are engaged. When we are talking about even very far advanced automation systems that are driver assistant ones, or if we are talking about ADS vehicles with such systems, when the systems are not engaged, these provisions of the existing conventions still apply to the full extent. Dynamic control of the vehicle is a very important concept when it comes to the legal perspective, and it directly links to the issues of liability, even though the liability issues are in the sphere of national decision making. So the new convention, as also the existing conventions, they do not address liability issues, but dynamic control of the vehicle has a direct link to that. This concept refers to carrying out all the real-time operational tactical functions required to move the vehicle, that is latitudinal and longitudinal control and monitoring the environment, etc. And it's also already defined in the context of Article 34 bis of the Vienna Convention, so that is already binding legal concept, so to say. There is still lots of unclarity when it comes to the line between ADAS and ADS. So one of the discussions we still need to continue is the question, how do we define when it is really an automated driving system to which the human can delegate the dynamic control, and when is it still a driver assistant system. And this is kind of a text that comes from the scoping draft. It says that where a vehicle system relies on a human to monitor the driving environment with a view to immediate and safety critical intervention, then it is not an ADS system, and the human bears all the responsibilities of the driver. There's a question.
Yeah, I was thinking of one case that I know of is that you have an ADAS system and you have a driver in the car, but then suddenly the ADAS system turns off for unknown reasons, and suddenly the driver is returned to be the control of the vehicle without the driver kind of consenting to that. Has there been any discussion about these kind of scenarios in people?
You say ADAS, yeah. Driver assistance system.
Dynamic control system.
ADS. Yeah, okay. Yeah, there has been discussions, obviously. And, well, one thing is that, and I will come back later to that, is that when we have a vehicle that issues transition demands, we have this resolution from 2022 addressing those issues. It says that the system must give enough leeway, enough time to be prepared. So the system cannot require the human to monitor continuously, but it has to be such that if it needs to transfer the dynamic control back to the driver, then you need to have sufficient time to regain situational awareness. Still, there is this question that some people think that when we think about the SAE levels, SAE level 3 would not actually be ADS system, and only levels 4 and 5 would be real ADS. Well, we have tried to avoid using SAE levels when it comes to this work in WP1, because so useful as those SAE levels are for the purposes that they were developed originally, for these kind of regulatory purposes, for deployment of automated vehicles, they don't serve very well. So we are trying to define this line between ADAS and ADS only. And it is a difficult work, and it may even change a little bit, so that in the course, so that there's always this difficulty when you are regulating new things, especially that many actors or players on the field actually would require or would ask for very clear guidance, and that would actually mean rather detailed legislation. But when we are talking about new issues, we know that we don't know much. We only see very few steps ahead of us, and the legislation should be able to stand the time, as these existing conventions, they really are quite old. They need to be future-proof, so it's kind of a balancing on the rope. Where do you get into too many details, and when is it so general that it really doesn't give any guidance? It is a hard job. But in any case, it is one thing that is clear, I think almost clear at least amongst the drafting volunteers that participated in this work, was that at any time it must be either the human or the ADS that bears the sole responsibility, i.e. the dynamic control. It cannot be mixed, because otherwise it will not be possible to determine responsibility/liability issues. We are facing this paradigm shift, which is really revolutionary. Taavi earlier on today talked about the industrial revolution and digital revolution that we have, and here in the existing conventions that really have endured the time very well, everything lies on the human driver. Even the paragraphs or the articles, if you take a look at those conventions, says that the driver must do this, the driver may not do that. And when we remove the driver from the picture, we face a complete another situation. So who is responsible for ensuring the safe behavior of the vehicle in traffic when we take away the traditional driver responsibility? Two tracks to be separated, and that has also been followed in the scoping draft. We have cases where there is still that responsible human being inside the vehicle. He or she may delegate the dynamic control to the system when it's inside its operational design domain. But then again, when the ODD ends or he or she wishes to drive, there is still a driver inside the vehicle. And then we have this other case where we only have passengers or cargo inside the vehicle, or it might even go empty. But in any case, there's nobody to take over the controls if something would happen, for example. So, yes.
Just a question. If I have a teleoperated vehicle, I have somebody in a remote control center driving it. Where does it fall in this?
Yeah, in the second, well, right-hand side.
So it's about the driver is in the vehicle.
Yes, the driver is in the vehicle or not in the vehicle. Yeah, who is inside the vehicle. So these two cases, if you keep them separate, it makes it a little bit more. It makes it a little bit easier to tackle all those issues. If you mix these things, then you will always end up in discussions saying that, yeah, but this does not apply this case, etc. So that's why it's easier if we separate those. But in any case, when we are speaking about the situations where we have a driver in the vehicle, we have these questions: what are the role and responsibilities of the driver when the ADS is engaged? And if some or all the responsibilities normally attributed to the driver are no longer borne by the human, then who is it that bears those responsibilities? And how is it possible to identify those entities that bear the responsibilities? And then again, the same issue of responsibilities if there is no driver in a vehicle at all, and how can the safety of such operations be ensured? If the driver is inside the vehicle, we still talk about dynamic control. The ADS can only have dynamic control if it performs if it performs all the dynamic control, then the ADS is in charge. But when we are talking about human, even if the human would perform part of the dynamic control or part of the dynamic driving tasks, if you wish to describe it like that, or would be required to monitor, they are still the driver, and all the driver's responsibilities apply. So for the ADS, only the full dynamic control, but for the human, it is enough if he or she exercises part of the dynamic control or monitors. And well, there's this discussion about terms, obviously. In many cases, when drafting the scoping draft, we have been trying to limit the number of terms on the new terms to the absolute necessary, because when you start defining these things, you can spend a decade on the definitions if you so wish. And even for this case, when the human has delegated the dynamic control, how do we call he or her? That is an issue that is unsolved. On WP29 side, they tend to use the term user as the basis, but we have ended up with a driver still, because some of the driver-related responsibilities may still be left, even though not the actual driving. There are some things like taking care of the seat belts of the miners, or making sure that the load is correctly placed in the vehicle, or stuff like that, that the automated driving system cannot take care of. But the thing is that when the ADS is engaged, the driver in readiness does not have the responsibility for how the vehicle behaves in road traffic. Back to the paradigm shift. The question here leads us to the answer that the role of the companies will be growing and must be growing. What we use in the scoping draft is a term called automated driving provider. That would mean an entity that assumes responsibilities for the behavior of the automated vehicle on the road when the ADS is engaged. We deliberately avoided defining more concretely what those entities could be, because there might be various solutions in various parts of the world, for example. They could be OEMs, they could be software developers, they could be other entities possibly as well. And the question obviously then is, how do we identify them and connect with the automated vehicles? Remote management is an issue that relates to the second case, where we only have passengers and cargo on the in the vehicle. So we also there propose some new terms. This remote management is a top-level term that would also include an element of remote driving, but as remote driving is not really automated driving, it's not as relevant in the context of this new legal instrument. What is more relevant is this remote assistance, which includes measures to support safety inside and outside the vehicle, but it's clear all the time that the ADS has the dynamic control in those cases. We also propose terms for actors or players on the field. There again, we have an entity, which is usually a company. We propose to call them remote management provider, and then we have remote management agent, that is a individual human being acting on behalf of the remote management provider. But here as well, the safety of those operations mostly rely on the actions of the remote management provider. They, for example, need to have safety management systems. They need to, in which they need to go through the whole of the operations. How do they organize remote management centers, for example? How do they organize data security? How do they organize sufficient data connections? What do they require at the moment, as there are no standards for the driver's licenses or personal permits for the remote management agents? What do they require in order them to be able to act as professionals. Then there is kind of a issue that needs to be debated, I guess rather heavily in the future, but it is proposed here that either the vehicle must have a person that is responsible and can act, if necessary, as a driver inside the vehicle, or it has to be subject to some kind of remote management. Some minimum features that would kind of increase the safety of the operations, so that there would be somebody knowing if we only have, for example, children or elderly in the car. There would be somebody knowing where the vehicle actually is, and there would be a possibility for communications, two-way communications from and to the vehicle with an actual human being, so that the help is provided if needed, and things like this. There's another paper that is also to be found on the UNECE web pages that deals more with these remote management issues. So if you are interested, you can take a look at that. And finally, a few words about our national working group. The basis is really this new Article 34 bis of the Vienna Convention. We aim to implement that in some time frame, so to say. But since we are a small nation, it's not very really feasible for us to try to invent something of our own. So it's very important that our work goes hand in hand with this international rehearsals, so to say. We also take a look at the examples of various countries very carefully. There are very interesting developments going on in many places. And our aim is to proceed to public consultation phase during next autumn, if everything goes well. Probably not on the paragraph level, but more like on the possible ways to go forward with. Thank you. If you have any questions, then I think I still have time.